The NBI is a non-profit organization established in 1995, coinciding with the dawn of our democracy. It serves as a collaborative platform where the private sector can unite to tackle pressing challenges and drive meaningful change. The NBI's mission focuses on fostering a sustainable and equitable society through responsible business practices and strategic interventions. The NBI aligns its projects with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly emphasizing gender equality, environmental sustainability, skills development, and economic inclusivity.
You know, this challenge that we've been having with regards to retaining our female employees, particularly at the higher levels, I've actually heard one of our competitors has recently done an assessment within their organization. Well, they actually used a particular tool that helped them to analyze what the actual problem is and why they were losing females at high levels within the organization and struggling to maintain them and keep them in the company. And it was quite interesting that this tool helped them to get to the bottom of it, and it turned out that it was the gender pay disparity. So they used this tool which helped them to calculate what the gender pay disparity is within the organization, which also helped them to unearth what the actual issues were leading to that. And so they then used that information and the outcomes of that tool to determine what changes need to happen in their policies and what strategies need to be implemented to actually change the situation.
But explain this to me. I mean, we've improved our recruitment policy. We've appointed more females into management positions. We've invested more in training. So why do we still have this gender pay disparity issue?
I hear where you're coming from. The reality is, whilst we've done great at attracting these female professionals into our organization, we're slowly starting to lose them. So the challenge is we are unable to retain them. And when we have to replace them, the cost, the time, and just them being responsive to our recruitment processes is quite challenging at the moment, mainly because of our gender pay disparity.
The gender pay gap is the difference in the average hourly wage that's earned by men versus that which is earned by women. In the post-apartheid era, there have been a few legislations that have come into play in order to increase participation of women. We've also seen higher education attainment levels that should have resulted in higher wages by women and therefore a narrowing or an actual eradication of a gender pay gap, yet it persists.
Okay, so you're saying that increasing the number of female recruits does not directly correlate with the reduction in the pay gap disparity.
Correct. So we actually need to have a better understanding of what is causing this gender pay disparity and what are the enablers, because that's then going to help us to understand where in our policies and how our policies are becoming bottlenecks or not allowing us to achieve the improvement that we actually want to see.
Okay, so it's really imperative for me as a leader to better understand the social and the systemic factors that are contributing to the perpetuation of this gender pay disparity issue. So then we need to look at how do we recruit, how do we do our performance assessments, particularly to inform promotions, and how do we invest in the development and coaching of our staff. And all of this needs to align with our strategic commitments to improving equal access to opportunity and reducing inequality in our workplace.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I believe we need to invest in the gender pay gap tool. This tool not only helps us to calculate what is the gender pay gap disparity percentage within our organization, but helps us to also come up with strategies that will be effective in closing this gap so that we can see the improvement that we want to see.
The Gender Pay Gap tool is an important development in securing gender pay parity in South Africa. The tool is an online platform in which users can safely and securely upload payroll data. The tool will help to analyze that data and then provide the user with a comprehensive and confidential report that can be used to judge how the company is doing in closing the pay gap and to provide a lot of useful information on the dynamics of that pay gap. There's been a long journey in the design of the gender pay gap tool. The design team had to work very closely with a number of partners to provide a user-centered approach in the design to make sure that the user was put at the heart of the experience. The tool ensures trust by not storing any sensitive information and can provide the user with really useful insights into the nature of any pay gap disparity in the company. For the first time, it provides a very strong evidence base of the nature of pay gap disparities based on gender lines, and that provides an evidence for robust conversations to be had on why do we still have a gender pay gap in our company, and if so, how and when are we going to close that pay gap? This is an important development in the struggle to secure gender pay parity in the country.
Hello.
Hey, baby girl. How was work?
Work. Same old.
You know, I never realized that me being paid less than my male peers back then would affect you in this generation. Even though I deserved equal pay for equal work, the system was just always biased against women. And now that I'm reaching retirement age, I'm realizing that I have not saved enough and I might have to depend on you. Do you think that the challenges I faced back then, you're still facing the same?
Not entirely, Mom. I can see that our generation faces a lot of new challenges, but the common thread between your generation and mine is the gender inequality and biases that we still face. It's still there, affecting the both of us. I think if you were fairly compensated as a woman in the workplace back then, we would have broken the cycle by now.
It is a well-established fact that the systemic exclusion and undervaluing of women across all spheres of society has major societal and economic implications, including directly contributing to GBV. In 2019, the South African Medical Research Council estimated the cost of GBV alone at around 43 billion. This includes the cost of healthcare, lost productivity, social and psychological implications, and this is just one area where gender equality can have a major impact. From a global perspective, the World Economic Forum estimates that gender equality in the workforce can add up to 28 trillion to global GDP by 2025, which is a 26% increase. The World Bank estimates that if women's earnings were to increase by just 10%, it could reduce the number of people living in poverty by 15 to 20%. Business has a key role to play in making a major impact on these issues to the area that it can directly influence.
It is with this in mind that in 2020, we began to work with the National Business Initiative into trying to understand how the gender pay gap is a barrier to women's full participation in the formal economy. In the one case, we wanted to understand where male and female employees have similar characteristics. What is the average hourly gender pay gap for such workers? But we also wanted to understand whether it was a case of discrimination, so that do individuals with similar characteristics but who differ on gender, do they earn the same or different? So is there any discrimination within these businesses? Once we controlled and said, assuming that everything else is the same and the only variation is gender, how much then do men earn more than women, or do women still earn more than men in the companies that we saw? And we see that in two of the companies, men earned more than women by between 9 and 11%. And this is just on the average wage, right? And in the one company, women actually earned more than men by about 18%, which is not typical, I'll say. And in conversations with this particular company, we were able to understand that they've done quite a lot of work in hiring, in ensuring that the benefits were offered to women to try and really bring up that pay gap that they'd previously experienced. And so this was a very unique story, a good story, but a very unique case that is actually not typical.
The issue with the gender pay gap is that it is caused by a multitude of factors such as role classification, systemic inequalities, the lack of transparency, poor and insufficient data in its entirety, all of which contribute to disparity. Policy structures and decisions shape our work environment. But can we say that these policies truly strive for balance and equity? We must ask ourselves how our organizations define and address economic inclusion and transformation within these policies. Business leadership plays a pivotal role in shaping workplace culture and practices, so leaders must strive to intentionally uphold inclusive and equal gender pay practices. There's also a need to address and transform the underlying structures that perpetuate gender and pay gap inequalities, striving for true equality and inclusiveness. The Gender Pay Gap tool can assist in curbing this issue. It effectively highlights pay disparities by assisting in establishing a baseline for corrective and improvement measures and in providing aid with strategic decision-making. Despite considerable progress, the gender pay gap remains a critical issue that demands immediate attention. The NBI is committed to closing this gap by 2030, but we cannot do it alone. Here is how the private sector can play a pivotal role. We can commit to transparency. Companies should commit to regular, transparent reporting on gender pay gap disparities within their organizations. Implement equal pay policies. Adopt and rigorously enforce policies that ensure equal pay for equal work, irrespective of gender. Support career advancement. Develop programs that support the career growth of women, providing mentorship, training, and opportunities for advancement. Promote inclusive workplaces. Foster a work environment that values diversity and inclusion at all levels, from an entry-level position to the boardroom. We urge all business leaders here today to commit to this cause. Review your pay structures, support policies that promote equality, and be the champions of change in your industry. The NBI has created a platform that drives collaboration and participation among businesses and other stakeholders so that we can have a better chance to achieve systemic change. Together, we can achieve a gender-equal workplace and pave the way for a brighter future for all.